Live from the 4077 supply tent, this is the Best Care Anywhere podcast. I am your host, Anthony. Joining us, as always, sitting over there on a box of discarded snow boots is Jared. How are you doing, buddy?
Cold.
Cold, all right. Sitting over on the box of used tongue depressors is our friend Ethan.
They were not used before I sat down, I'll tell you that much.
Oh,
He's been busy.
all right. And I'm very excited because joining us as our second guest of the show, he is coming into the supply tent now carrying what appears to be a kitchen sink. It is Mike Jamison. Hello, Mike.
I will tell you, I've been very excited about this. My belly button has been puckering and unpuckering all day just thinking about
That's wonderful. That's
being
wonderful.
on the show.
Yeah, I'm gonna warn the audience right now. There are now two people that can make MASH references at each other that the other two people in this call will not get, and I love that. I can already sense the discomfort now. If you are not familiar with Mike, how dare you? How dare you not be familiar with him? He is the co-host of the Nice Guys podcast, a motion picture podcast. He is a frequent and recurring guest of MASHCasts with Rob Kelly over there at the Fire and Water Podcast Network. And he has what might be the greatest single Twitter handle I have ever seen. This lightsaber kills fascists on Twitter. Yes, he is in the house and he is here, and we're going to be discussing all sorts of fun MASH topics. We've already been talking for like 40 minutes to an hour, at least me and him directly, so it's been an evening already.
If I would have known that this Twitter handle would have got me this much play, my God, I wish I was like high school or college age.
It's really speaking to the woke millennials right on the internet.
Yes.
You picked a great time. You're in the zeitgeist now.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah, I'm always right there. Yeah.
I know we've been talking for about 40 minutes, but how's everyone doing tonight? Jared, you survived. You're still alive up there. You haven't had a Donner Party, anybody. This is good.
Not yet.
Ethan's in Kansas,
But as a show of solidarity, I will be driving through the blizzard this Thursday.
That's right. You're coming to
my
visit
destination.
us.
Yep.
You're coming to visit us, and I'm scared.
Yeah.
So we're all middle of the country or West Coast. How's it out on the East Coast? What's going on over there? Because you're in Philadelphia, right?
Right outside of Philadelphia. Yes.
Oh, nice.
It's a nice, mild, quiet winter, and I'd like to keep it that way because I don't like to shovel snow, because I'm old, and I don't like to do things that make my body hurt. I like to sit down. I'm already on my third beer, so I like to sit down, have a nice cocktail, watch MASH, listen to this podcast.
Oh,
have I kissed up enough?
You have kissed enough butt, I think.
I'm on the show already, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're here. You've made it. You don't have to keep ingratiating us.
Well, just be careful because I've got a few Kansas City Chiefs comments locked and loaded at any time.
Oh,
so.
no.
That's all right. I'll take them. I understand.
I just realized he's wearing the beanie. Oh no.
Yeah, I got the Eagles. I have the Eagles hat on. It's okay.
You can't, Ethan.
It's
you know
okay.
Kansas
It's
City
fine.
isn't in Kansas, right?
Shut up! I can't hear you.
I keep you.
So
I'm a Philadelphia fan. I'm used to pain. Don't worry.
Okay. Good. Like we said last week, sports, do the thing, win the points. So before we get into this week's episode, I do have to acknowledge, and by the way, this is totally unplanned because I don't have a clue what's going on any given day of the week. On this day in history, just to kind of get us a frame of reference, what was going on around the time this episode aired, which we're actually discussing something that happened 11 years after this episode aired. February 28th, 1983?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'm like, did I write that date down right? Was the series finale of a very popular American TV show. I wonder if you guys can guess which one it might be.
SpongeBob.
Ooh, I'm sorry. No, it is the 40th anniversary of the series finale of MASH was this past week, and I absolutely do not expect Ethan or Jared to have watched it because one, spoilers, and two,
Yeah,
You
spoilers.
haven't built
Come
up.
on.
You haven't built up the emotional reservoir of pain that you have to experience when the show ends.
No, we need more content
However,
for that.
yeah,
Spoilers,
we need more
the Korean
content.
War. Spoilers, the Korean War does actually end.
Yeah, Ethan was very upset when I told him I was watching the finale of
Does
the
it,
show,
though?
and he's like, "Spoilers." I'm like, but my guy, I hate to tell you this, the war ends. It may go on for like 8 years longer in MASH than it does in real life, but it does end.
Well, maybe the real MASH were the friends we made along the
Oh, no
way.
way.
Aww, everyone. Aww, no. But I did. I did not let the moment pass on social media, and I can only read like 3 of the many like tens of comments we got because all of them have direct story points that I don't want to bring up. But there is one of us who did exist on this planet when that finale happened. Not to point out how much younger the 3 of us are than him, but I figured since we have you on, first of all, how did you get acquainted with MASH, as we ask every other guest? But how old were you, and what was the experience watching the show end, too?
I was born on the planet Krypton. Oh, no, that's the different origin story. I don't know. I honestly, I wish I had like some really cool, interesting way to say that I got into MASH, but I feel like I've been watching MASH my whole life. Like we were talking before we started recording. I mean, I can remember watching it when it was actually on. I probably watched it. I would think my dad probably watched the episode, so this was I am old. This was the early 80s, so you actually sat with your family and watched TV. So I probably was sitting with him watching MASH, and then it was on syndication because, of course, for our younger listeners, I grew up when you didn't have an iPad and YouTube to watch for like 27 straight hours, like my kids do. So you had to watch what was actually on TV, and on TV were syndicated reruns of popular TV shows. So twice a day, they had an hour block of MASH that I would watch and tape on VHS tapes. Go on Wikipedia, you'll be able to look up what VHS tapes are. And I would watch them over and over and over again. And eventually watched the movie. And the funny thing is about this episode, there was a Columbia House. You could send in. They would send you videotapes in special boxes. It was like a mash box, and it would have like 4 episodes on the tape. And this was one of the episodes that was on one of the tapes. It would be recurring. You would sign up for like a year, and then you had to cancel any time. I don't know if you remember watching those commercials. So yeah, I mean, I put it on Twitter, I think, of me on my I think it was my 9th birthday in like a MASH like sweatshirt. MASH was big.
I think
It
I
was
shared that with.
funny that show about like doctors in a war. There was actually action figures and a clothing line, and you could buy merchandise in the early 80s. And so it's my birthday party at Burger King, and I'm in my MASH sweatshirt, and I think I had my matching MASH like khaki green pants on also. So
I remember
actually
the
ready to
red
enlist.
stripe on it.
Yeah,
It's amazing
the
I didn't
kids
get more
refer to
dates.
that as dripped out.
He's dripped out.
I was
Oh
tripped out.
no.
But I think they had a Klinger Halloween costume. I did not go out as Klinger. It was just like Jamie Farr's face. It was the old the plastic
God, that
Halloween
must have
mask.
looked horrifying.
It probably was. I'm surprised they didn't use that for the Michael Myers mask. But
Oh no.
So yeah, I am like an OG. I've always liked MASH. I don't remember how I started getting into MASH, but I feel like I've always been into MASH. And then I can actually remember when the DVDs first came out. That was like a big thing when the DVD format first came out. You would wait, or movie fans like me or pop culture fans would wait to see what movies or TV shows were finally going to get released onto DVD. So I remember when they started to kind of like dole out the MASH seasons one by one, and started buying those. And yeah, so I own it on DVD. I watch it on Hulu. I'll probably buy it on Apple eventually just to have the whole series on Apple. And we live in
Gotta
the
have
age now
backups.
of a million different things to watch. You should never be bored. And usually on a Saturday night, at like 1 o'clock in the morning, if I want to watch something, I'll just go onto Hulu and like watch another MASH episode for like the millionth time. It's like my
Wow.
cuddly warm blanket that I just put around me because it makes me feel so good.
Aw. Well, very cool. So I guess I should say for this week's episode, because we talked a little bit so a little bit of backstory about how Mike got here. I was listening to Rob Kelly's MASHcast, and I powered through the first 3 seasons so that I wasn't inadvertently repeating verbatim things I heard on his show on this show. And I got to, I'm trying to remember what episode it was that I made the connection, but I had started to pick out who the reoccurring guests were. I'm like, oh, this Mike guy's really, really cool. I like what he has to say. And he's usually, for some reason, on the Sidney episodes all the time. But at the end of one of the episodes, I think Rob says to you, let the people know where you are because you have one of the best Twitter handles on the internet. And I stop and I go, no, because this has already been, this was after we'd started the podcast and you had been a regular commenter. And I'm like, there's no way. And it's like, this lightsaber goes fashion. I'm like, all right, that's it. We're getting him on the show. Because I think at this point you had already joked about coming on the show, but we talked about what episode to bring you on, and you were kind of open to any episode, but I chose Sticky Wicket because this is an episode that I kind of wanted to have. No offense to Jared and Ethan.
Uh-oh.
This episode is one that I kind of skipped over when I was, not skipped over, but was kind of like, whatever. It's a more boring episode when I was younger. But more recently, having seen the series through all the way a couple times, this episode is really good for reasons we will discuss shortly. And I wanted to have another MASH person to kind of balance us out. So it wasn't just me talking at length about why I think this episode's so good. Now it'll be 2 of us talking at length. But so without further ado, I think it is time. And to anyone, I'll mention to anyone that did comment on, I asked on Twitter, where were you when the final episode aired and all that? Thank you for sharing your stories. Like I said, about 99% of them I can't share because there's direct spoilers as to things that happen to certain characters. So thank you for commenting. I won't be reading any of them. We'll save them for another 10 years from now when we get to the finale. But so the episode we're discussing today is season 1, episode 21, Sticky Wicket. I completely forgot to write down the air date for this episode. Oh my goodness, I'm such a bad podcast host.
It's actually, I think it's May 4th, 1973. So it's kind of
March
like
4th.
amazing.
It was yesterday.
March 4th,
20 or 40 years, 50 years ago. Oh God.
Yep.
It was yesterday as of recording, 50 years ago. Oh boy.
Yep.
Written by Don Weis. This is a gentleman we've seen previously on the show. He wrote Cowboy, and he will go on to write another 14 episodes of MASH after this throughout the various seasons. Directed by Don Weis, written by Laurence Marks. Laurence has a lot of MASH that we have yet to see, but we have seen some of his work. The Moose, Yankee Doodle Doctor, Henry Please Come Home, and Love Story. So we are familiar with both of these gentlemen. And let's just hop right into it. We open on the swamp. Radar, apparently after the Long John flap, Radar is now a poker genius because he is playing with the guys.
Yeah.
He won the Long Johns. Like, we're not going to get into the chain of custody of the Long Johns again. We have beaten that to death. Everyone was wrong. That's what we've come to. Everyone was incorrect. We have to do the obligatory Ugly John's here.
I was so excited to see him and to be on the episode when Ugly John is back because I knew
He's
you guys
back.
He's
back.
I mean, a peek behind the curtain, we can all see each other. I am surprised there is not like a picture of Ugly John on anybody's wall behind them.
Oh
right
yeah,
now.
we stand all the great long lasting characters that we can't wait to experience for many seasons. Ugly John.
I can't wait for these guys to see what
Private
happens.
Boone.
I can't wait for these guys to see what happens to Ugly John in the finale. I cried. I cried.
Oh, now you're just being mean.
Why? Why do you do this to me?
I love just subtly teasing things that they clearly all know it's going to happen, but I still like doing it. Although, you know this, Mike, we do see Ugly John again, kind of, at some point.
Yes, we do.
Maybe.
I mean, it's good. Yeah, we'll remember this.
He's having an aneurysm right now.
Remember this 7 years from now.
Yeah, remember that. Make a note. 7 years from now, you'll need to remember Ugly John. But the boys are playing poker. Ugly John's asleep. Radar appears to be beating the pants off of at least Trapper, just by sheer luck and coincidence.
I don't know if it's total. I don't know if it's total luck though, because they do establish in the show that Trapper is very bad at poker.
Yeah. Trapper kind of sucks at poker.
Although Radar says that he taught him how to play, but yeah, Trapper is not the best poker player.
Yeah. We have what is possibly my favorite joke about Radar's height in the entire series. Radar screams to Hawkeye, "Stop making fun of my height," to which Hawkeye responds, "What height? You don't have any height. Go get some height and we'll make fun of it."
Go get some height and then we'll make fun of it.
It's so bad. They're so mean to him, but it's so great. Wounded arrive per Radar's extrasensory perception. They all get up to go to surgery. Ugly John has an ace-high flush, which doesn't matter because it's from 2 hours ago. It's not even the same deck of cards that they're playing with anymore. And they go to surgery. And this is where the episode starts to open up for me. We're in a standard surgical scene. And Jared and Ethan, I don't know if you've picked up on this yet, but I think, Mike, you'll understand what I mean by this. Hawkeye's in one of his moods.
That's a good way to describe it.
Hawkeye's feeling good about himself today, and he's subtly letting everyone know about it. Would that be a fair way to kind of describe?
I don't know if he's subtle. I don't know if he's subtly letting everybody know about it.
He thinks he's subtle about it.
Yeah,
but I think this is the first episode we see where, yes, Hawkeye is a good doctor, and we know this, and he's a little rough around the edges. But this is one where he's not doing it passively. He's kind of doing it actively. Let's not
beat around the bush. Hawkeye's being a dickhead.
Yeah, he is.
I intended to save my thoughts on that for the very end, but yeah, good God. I mean, I hate Frank just for how many stills he's destroyed, and even I was like, whoa.
Which, again, there's better scenes coming up to talk about it, but Hawkeye is very much he's in his element, and he's a good doctor, but when he's having an exceptionally good day, he starts to become a little bit of an ass. And this is probably the worst we've seen Hawkeye being as far as behaving childish.
When you're throwing clamps at people, I mean, I agree. Like, I'm no fan of Frank's, and I will take Frank being berated because he probably deserves it. But I was at a point where I was like, lay off him a little bit there. Like, calm down. We get it.
Yeah. So standard OR scene. Frank's bumbling. Hawkeye's gallows humoring and making fun of Frank, and everyone else is just trying to work normally, like the sane people that they are. In the mess tent, they're going over the day. Frank confronts Hawkeye as to why he's so critical of him in the operating room. And to be fair, Hawkeye is not wrong in what he says afterwards, but much like I've criticized Frank for giving orders to people, there's better ways to maybe communicate your thoughts, Mr. Chief Surgeon. Again, no love for Frank, but Hawkeye, ignore the military part of it. You're the chief surgeon at a hospital. Be a little bit more professional, maybe. But he's not wrong. He calls Frank an incompetent surgeon. He wouldn't let him operate on himself for dandruff. He's distracting. He's dumb, which is all fair, but he's being very confrontational when he does it, which isn't going to help anything.
I think it hits a little bit harder in this episode, too, because Frank isn't played as buffoonish as he has been.
Yeah.
And as he will be. He's kind of more... and again, I don't know when these were filmed, and then, you never know when they're aired. But he is, like I said, he's not as buffoonish as he is. So he's coming off as arrogant, and like you said, he deserves it. But, like, Hawkeye, you're, like, reel it in just a little bit. Like, we get it. So you don't,
It just seems to me like in the OR scene, they were trying to highlight kind of the less good qualities of both characters. They show Frank being overly cruel to a nurse who's doing her best, and Hawkeye berating him needlessly. Gallows humor, like you said, Anthony, I think was a good way. So it's just an interaction where nobody comes out smelling like roses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, alluding to the conversation we had prior to recording actually starting, we talked about Mike and I were talking about like, oh, do you prefer the later seasons or the earlier seasons? And we started talking about all these little like micro opinions that the MASH community has. Like the example I gave was Wayne Rogers was better than BJ. I can't think of his actor. Mike Farrell. And I miss Trapper, and BJ's a piece of crap. And it's like, and everyone stands Hawkeye, and Hawkeye's the greatest character to ever exist. Hawkeye's not perfect, and he's frequently an ass to people around him. Yeah. And this is the first episode where, yes, Hawkeye is our moral viewpoint for the series, but and I think to Alan Alda's credit and the writer's credit, no one in the show is perfect. Even beloved characters like later we're going to get Charles and Potter, they're not perfect, and that's what makes the show so good.
Yep.
Is that he's not Captain America. He's not this, white knight on a shining horse. But
yeah, I think Alan Alda, I mean, especially, and again, we were talking about this beforehand, in the later seasons, I think he made it a point to kind of show even more that Hawkeye wasn't perfect and that he could be annoying. He was not always right and stuff like that. But this is one of the first episodes. They're not trying to make, you're always on Hawkeye and Trapper's side because they're the good guys. But I think the point of this episode is to see that as much as it's Hawkeye coming to the realization that why am I doing this? While I'm here, why am I doing this? Am I doing this to help people? Or am I doing this because I'm worried about how this is going to reflect back on me or how I think about myself? And they, again, spoiler for you guys and for anybody else who hasn't gone past this season, they come back to this with another character later in the series. And I kind of came to that realization watching this, and I was like, oh. And it's funny because Hawkeye is the one who throws back at him. And I wish that's one of the things, this was made in the 70s and 80s when you didn't have to have continuity. You'll go through MASH and there's, you never know what year it is, who's the president, how long they've been there. If this was a show,
the Chinese start attacking, I think the Chinese attacked 7 times.
Yeah. If this was a show that was made now and they had more continuity and, they would go back and revisit things that happened in earlier seasons, it actually would have been interesting to see them bring this back up in that later episode, because this is kind of a turning point for the character, I think. So yeah, I mean, I do like that. Hawkeye is personally my favorite character, but I will never say that he's like a perfect character. And I like that because there shouldn't be. And if they presented him as a perfect character, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't make the relationship work between him and Frank and what's going on there. So I liked it. I always liked they showed him he's human.
Yeah. So the question I'll pose to Jared and Ethan, because you've only really experienced Hawkeye and Frank as we've seen them so far in the series, is Hawk's treatment of Frank maybe not fair, but is it justified? Is Frank really as bad enough to warrant Hawkeye berating him publicly, mind you, in the mess tent in front of everyone?
I think,
or is this maybe a little much
so far? Frank is a good doctor, but he's a shit human being. So while he may be, incredibly unpleasant to be around, he does generally do a good job when it matters.
Yeah, and we have seen moments of him being the moment that always sticks out to me when we talk about, Frank's always been an ass and has never done anything positive. There are moments in the first season for sure, and maybe a little bit in the second, where like Henry, please come home, when Henry's like, oh, we're gonna cut radar open, and even Frank's like, whoa, hang on, let's try this. Like they do turn Frank into just this kind of buffoon, mustache twirling villain. at some point, but in the early seasons, there's still a glimmer of he's still a doctor and knows what he's doing. He's just incredibly unpleasant about how he goes about it. But so,
and I want to parrot what Jared said because it's in fairness to Frank, I can't believe I'm saying that. The only I know nothing about medicine. I had to Google a lot of terms in this episode. The only way that I have a glimmer that Frank is maybe not the best doctor is because Hawkeye and Trapper give him relentless shit about it. He could be a great doctor and they're just ego tripping, but the way he treats his nurses is inexcusable.
It's mostly, for now, it's mostly his interpersonal relationship with the staff that's causing problems, not so much his ability. But that'll change. That'll change. Don't worry. Of course, this public beratement of Frank cannot go unanswered by one Margaret Houlihan.
Of course not.
So,
she must defend his honor.
Yes. I mean, let's be honest. We're going to learn. Margaret is a force to be reckoned with. If someone had to defend my honor, Margaret might be on the list of people I'd choose. She will not back down.
If I had to get into a fight with somebody, I'd bring Margaret with me. I'm not doing it. Margaret.
Well, you're certainly not bringing Frank.
Also. No, you're not bringing Frank.
We've also seen Trapper box. I'm not bringing Trapper. So Radar has to go to Henry, who is trying to get some sleep, and tell him that, hey, Margaret is Major Houlihan's losing her mind. She's angry and demands answers. And I love Henry. What do you want me to tell her? You march back in there. You look her in her cold, steely eyes and tell her I'm on my way.
I'll be right there.
McLean Stevenson's great in that. It's a great episode for McLean Stevenson overall, but just the way he delivered that it's great.
Yeah, the thing I'm noticing doing this podcast, because when I usually binge the series, season 1 for me lasts 2 weeks. Like, depending on how frequently I'm watching them on an evening after work, it's season 1 either lasts 2 weeks to maybe a month, and then I'm into the later seasons. And we're watching this more on the time frame that they would have been released. You get the new episodes in the fall, and then you get the reruns through the spring, and then you get the new episodes again next fall. So I'm realizing, I feel like we're getting more time. At least I am, for the first time, getting more time to realize, Trapper and Henry were on the show for 3 full years, and that's why people got so attached to them. But also because scenes like we're going to see with McLean Stevenson that are just amazing. So Radar gets Hawkeye up to go answer for his absolutely abhorrent treatment of Major Burns, of course. Margaret is claiming that his public beratement of Frank is lowering morale, which, is it lowering morale? Probably not. Is it not a good look to have your chief surgeon publicly berating another doctor? Also probably not good. So Margaret, like we've said before, Margaret is not wrong, but she's going about it the wrong way. She's insufferable.
She's always quick. She's got the quick trigger finger of, I'm going to call a general. She's always quick with I'm going to call a general or somebody else. So it's like, come on.
I'm so glad that eventually goes away, but
but
it's like we saw in the pilot. It's like we saw in the pilot. Frank's reading the Bible, and what is she reading? The Army Officer's Guide. Like, she is. We forget she grew up an Army brat. This is the only set of moral guidelines she knows is the military.
Again, from watching the whole series, and maybe this is my comic book brain, but I need to no prize away. I need to put, even though MASH doesn't do it, I need to put all these seasons and all the stuff that's going on in a time frame. So I always think of this as very, very early on in the war that they're there, because even within this season or even in into the second season, Hawkeye is not this obnoxious. And his relationship with Henry changes, where he handles it. I mean, he's just, again, as I said, I love Hawkeye. he's just obnoxious to everybody in this episode. He's obnoxious to Radar by calling him short. He's obnoxious to Trapper. He's obnoxious to Henry. He's obviously obnoxious to Frank and Margaret. So I always headcanon this as like this is like a month or two into the war, and they still are kind of like working out their relationships and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because
I'll have to find someone on Reddit did a really nice based on, they said, ignoring dates that are said on the show and historical events that are mentioned in the show. They kind of parsed out like seasons 1 to 3 are about this amount of time, it feels like. But yeah, I'll have to find that post and share it with you guys, because it's actually a good way of looking at kind of how long these characters knew each other, quote unquote.
Yeah, please.
But Hawkeye is basically like, look, people need to know that Major Burns should not be trusted medically, which, okay, if that's your opinion, fine, but you got to find a better way to communicate that, because you're just aggravating people. And then we get the next OR scene, and I love this scene because Alan, Loretta, and I'm going to forget the actor's name for Ugly John, and I forgot to write it down. Shoot. This is why I keep my internet tabs open, so that I can look like a little bit less of an idiot with editing. John Orchard. I know.
There you go.
I know what his character name matched his first name. John Orchard. The three of them, immediately by the tone of the way they deliver the lines and the way the camera is worked, you realize, oh, this isn't a we're goofing off in surgery. This is a more serious Hawkeye's having a little bit of trouble scene. And we see that with, it's a little bit, it's not dire, but it's definitely more tense. He's speaking more, he's not goofing off as much. He's more direct in what he's doing. And I would say the three characters in this episode that we get a lot of insight to going forward are Hawkeye, Frank, Henry also, but I would say also Margaret is on that list. Because in this scene, the scene before, she's her angry military rules defending Frank, but when the chips are on the table, both she and Hawkeye focus up, and we see kind of a different side to her a little bit for the first time.
Yeah, I think what you said, even with like having to get along with Frank, I mean, you have to remember they're in a war zone, so as much as like they hate him, they need him. I mean, again, this isn't like reality. I'm sure in a real MASH there was more than 3-4 surgeons. They had different shifts.
It'd be about 12.
Yeah, they had different shifts and stuff like that. But if you're going with the reality that this show is establishing, so you have like 4 surgeons, you know what? He might be a terrible doctor, but he's there and you're going to need him, especially if you have like 20 or 30 people waiting to be worked on outside while you're in surgery. But, and again, like you see that as much as Hawkeye and Margaret can go at each other when they, like you said, when they have to work together and when they have to be a team, and the objective is to save somebody's life, you got to get over what's going on between you and just get to work and do what you got to do, and you have to forget about all the other stuff that's going on at that moment. And it's the same thing with Frank. I mean, as much as you're busting his balls, basically, it would be much more helpful if you would work to make it easier for him to get through whatever he's getting through, and then it's going to make it easier for everybody else during an OR session, because all you're going to do is just make him probably make a mistake, and then you're going to have more work for yourself. And like you said, Hawkeye and Trapper, I mean, they're shown to be, their egos are pretty big. I mean, they think that, I mean, they have the reputation of being the 2 best doctors out there, but it's like, if you're in surgery for like 30 hours, I don't think you want to keep on taking on people because you don't want Frank. We're at the point again where they just think he's a bad doctor. They're not saying that he's like actively causing patients to die or anything like that. So it's like, find a way to work around it, and then we'll all just be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And see, this is why we bring you on, because you have deep thoughts that I can't articulate.
Only about TV shows.
Only about TV shows, nothing else. Yeah. So they pull the rest of the shrapnel out. Hawkeye immediately is back to cracking a joke. Oh, made in the USA. And that's how we kind of know, like, he's gotten past where you kind of see it in the way the look in his eyes and the way he delivers the line. He was very tense. He makes one little move and he's like, there, made in the, like, he's back to, I did it. I'm the greatest again kind of mode. And we immediately, I love the pacing in this episode. We're harassing Frank. I'm the best doctor. Ooh, this surgery's a little difficult. We're right into post-op where the patient he operated on the day before is going south. And props to the makeup department. They got him drenched in sweat. Very clearly not having a good time. And Hawkeye, again, we hear Hawkeye, he's still cracking a little bit of jokes because you have to have that kind of bedside manner. You can't be like, oh my God, oh my God, you have a fever and you might die. Damn, that's crazy. Anyway, you got to have a little bit of good, positive bedside humor, so to speak. But you can also immediately tell in this scene, Hawkeye's concerned immediately because I did everything right. Why is this patient sick? So...
But why is he concerned? Is he worried about the patient, or is he worried because
he's going to look bad? Exactly. And I think I don't want to put words in Jared or Ethan's mouth. And I think the first time watching through, until Henry, at least for me, until Henry kind of opens that door to us, I probably thought the first time I saw this episode, oh, Hawkeye's concerned for his patient, which he is. But I don't think I ever considered that other part until Henry comes in later. So
we'll get into it.
Oh, Ethan, I can tell Ethan has thoughts. I can see the smoke coming out of his ears. So Hawkeye's concerned, and you can tell because Trapper comes in. It's like, there's movie tonight. Do you want to play some poker? And he's like, no. He's like, it gets established Hawkeye is a good doctor and you can tell his gears are working, but it also turns him into an ass when he feels like he's underperforming. And it's already kind of starting by brushing off Trapper by not communicating. But
and I know that people, and Wayne Rogers even felt like he didn't get enough to do, which he really didn't get enough to do. He was supposed to be like the co-lead. But I actually do like him in this scene and even in this episode where he subtly, like in character, he is there for Hawkeye. Like he is backing him up. Where the way he does it is he's just more of a lighthearted he's more flippant, but you can tell that he's there for his friend, where he knows that Hawkeye's going through something and he'll mess around, but at certain points he'll say like, what's up, and he'll talk to him. And even, just that little, like, good luck and all that kind of stuff. I understand his frustration, Wayne Rogers, because he didn't get to showcase what he could do. But I do like Hawkeye and Trapper's relationship. It's different than, as you guys will see in later seasons with BJ, but I do like the friendship between Hawkeye and Trapper. Like, and I think you see it in this episode. He really does back up. He knows his friend's going through something. He doesn't push it, but he's there for him.
God, I already know years from now we are bringing you back for the Trapper or BJ episode. The who's a better friendship, Trapper and Hawk or BJ and Hawk? Because I can already tell that both our gears are turning on that just from you saying that. Oh boy, so many thoughts. So Hawkeye's concerned about his patient. We jump to, I'm assuming this is over the course of probably 2 days. There was day 1 or 3 days. Day 1 surgery, the mess tent scene, day 2 surgery, mess tent, and day 3 is when Hawk figures it out. But so we're in the second night in the mess tent. Everyone's enjoying the supposed chicken and camouflage gravy. And Hawkeye comes in, and the first question Trapper asks is, how's your patient?
How's Thompson?
Yeah, how's Thompson? And Hawkeye is clearly frustrated. And in comes Frank, which...
Enter stage right, Frank.
So, actually, it's audience right, stage left.
Yeah, it'd be stage left.
Yeah. Shut up, Ethan.
So... Well, fuzzy on the whole left-right thing.
Yeah. it's a whole thing. So Hawkeye comes in. He's still concerned about his patient. He's trying to kind of vent his thoughts. And Frank, I just can't believe it. Oh, Frank.
And to Trapper's credit, he delivers a great line to Frank. Why don't you let that cut under your nose heal, which is my new favorite way to tell somebody to shut up.
That's a great line. It's one of the top 5 MASH lines of the whole series.
Really? Yeah. Oh, boy.
Yes.
Dude, I think if you pulled the entire MASH fandom for their top 5 favorite lines, you would get probably every line in the series at some point. But that's just good writing, then. But my question, before we get into Frank's comments, I'm not going to say Frank is right in the things he pokes Hawkeye with. But if I were in Frank's shoes and I had this surgeon who, regardless of the objective fact that I feel is overstating his superiority and is poking fun at me constantly, having been the fat kid in elementary school that got picked on, is Frank a little bit justified in dishing out Hawkeye's own medicine back to him a little bit, or no?
Not in the way he does it.
Not in the way, not with a patient that is potentially on his deathbed. That is no.
Except for that one line, ignoring the deathbed patient and the one line where he goes too far, is it okay for Frank to at least call Hawkeye out when he messes up? If he's going to do it constantly,
but
not the right time.
Yeah, not the right time. Exactly.
Well,
not the right time.
You can't just ignore that line, and I was going to say it at some point during this episode. I joke about it a lot with this stills, but this is the line that, in my eyes, Frank truly becomes irredeemable.
Man, there's so many moments where you think Frank can't get worse, and
well,
he does.
I'm sure about that, but you have to remember, this is somebody who is likely going to die. I mean, I get you're a doctor in a war zone, but you are using a soldier's life as a bargaining chip to just poke at this guy that also poked at you. That is fucked.
Yeah,
it is a little fucked.
Yeah, he's when it gets to that line, it's tough. I see where, because again, the characterization of Frank right now is not the over the top, more buffoonish type of character. It's more of he's arrogant. He thinks he's better than he is. So you know what? In this situation, he should know better. As a doctor, you can't say that. You can't, no matter what. No matter what, you can't say that's a person's life, and you shouldn't be. You can't just use that as a flippant type of line to get back at somebody that you're mad at. You just can't.
Yeah. Well, and he starts out very like poking at Hawkeye the way Hawkeye would poke at him. You know, operating with one hand tied behind your back. You know, yesterday I was Dr. Screw Up, and now you've made it again. If it weren't a life-threatening mistake, I could see where it's like, Frank, you're being an ass, but to be fair, Hawkeye, this is what you dish out to him on a daily basis. Can you take it?
Yeah.
But again, the line where he goes too far is, I haven't killed anyone today, hot shot. This is one of the big moments where I'm like, this is a great spot moment for Margaret, because even Margaret turns and goes, ooh, you did not just say that. Like, she even starts to go like, Frank, like, dude, I can't. You have crossed the line where even Margaret's like, I'm done. I just was skipping ahead, and I just missed the line where Hawkeye says, "Why don't you be quiet and just play kneesies with Big Mama?" Oh no,
Big Mama.
Which yeah, and of course that sets Hawkeye off, because absolutely not okay thing for Frank to say.
No,
but Hawkeye is also on edge. He's feeling, this is probably I would say, except for one other very obvious patient that he wasn't able to save, this is probably the first time a case has gone immediately sour on him after he thought everything was going to be okay. And it's messing with his head a little bit. And during all this, Radar's just eating.
Yeah, my man just wants his chicken.
I missed earlier where Hawkeye got distracted berating Frank, and he's like, where was I? And Radar just looks up from his chicken, surgically incompetent.
Surgically incompetent. Thank you, Radar. Very cool.
So they're fighting as they are to do, and we get Hawkeye afterwards going back to post-op and just laying next to Thompson, just looking at his charts thinking, what is going on? I can't figure out what has gone wrong. Because in Hawkeye's mind, the surgery is perfect. It's something between closing him up and now that has gone wrong.
But exactly what you're saying. He's not sitting next to him holding his hand saying you're going to be okay. He's sitting next to him, looking over him, looking at his chart saying, I know that I did everything right because why wouldn't I? So what exactly is going wrong? So it's
what could possibly be the problem here?
What could possibly be the problem? Because it can't be anything that I did.
Yeah,
well,
which is funny.
Of course not.
Which is funny because I think in another 2 or 3 seasons, I think there's an exact copy of this scene almost with Frank, where Frank walks in and he goes, well, why isn't he getting any better? Like literally, he says it like a kid. He's like, this doesn't make sense. Why isn't he getting better? But the next morning, he's woken up. Thompson is doing even worse the next morning, and he has to get dragged out of post-up by Trapper. Like, you need to eat food. You need to get some coffee. And even Hawkeye even walks back in and is just staring at Thompson. It's like Trapper's like, look, come here.
Yeah.
No, come here.
That's another great scene. Again, like he pulls he knows what he knows what his friend needs right now, and he's they could have like stopped that scene or whatever like right on him just looking at him, but I like that they had Trapper come back in and take him out. Like you need to decompress right now and just take your mind off of this for a little bit, or you're literally gonna drive yourself nuts. So come on.
But as we can see, Hawkeye can't decompress. He can't stop thinking about it because in the shower with Ugly John, of course, John's first question is, how's Thompson? And Hawkeye immediately snaps, is that the only thing anyone could ask me? And despite John letting it go, Hawkeye's like, about the same. Like he can't not let it go. I do love that.
Just an example of like Hawkeye is just a dick to every.
Hawkeye's a dick. He's a dedicated dick, but he's a dick.
I understand why he's being like this, but again, like Ugly John's just trying to like give him a little bit of support and take his mind off of it. He's just being a dick.
And he's even trying to joke like, you want to come play poker? My wife already just made the check out to you because of course. And Hawkeye Hawkeye's like, yeah, no, I can't think about poker while also thinking about this. We get the poker scene, and Ethan, you've mentioned before, Texas Hold'em is the only form of poker you know. We've had 2 different types of poker so far on the show. We've had draw poker, which I still need to teach you, and I believe in this episode they're playing 7-card stud. So I had played many hours of 7-card stud with my grandma and brothers, and my grandma is a poker fiend. So she's got to make money for the collection tin at church somehow, Dude, she was ruthless. My brother'd be crying because he ran out of chips, and my grandma's like, well, gotta learn someday. So they're playing poker. Hawkeye, I love how they have him framed just in the background. And I don't think the camera work in MASH gets enough credit. I love the camera shot of the close up on Hawkeye. You see everyone's hands, shuffling cards, doing the pot, but they're all out of focus, and and it focuses on Hawkeye because that's basically where he's is. Like the whole world's just kind of like the people, the people from the Peanuts, just and he's just hyper focused on what's going on with his patient and how it's.
And this is a good example of where this is like ostensibly this is the serious episode. He's sitting there like you could tell he's in his feelings, he's in his thoughts. But I love like, and again, I'm here for the Trapper love. I'm here to give Trapper a top. Yes. I do love
you and Ethan are here for the Wayne Rogers love.
I do love the scene with Trapper and Radar where he's so like we are not leaving Korea until I can't remember what he said, until I make my money back or something like that. So I like the juxtaposition of Hawkeye just sitting there like going over and over again like, what can I have done wrong? While Trapper just is mad that he's losing at poker to Rick again.
Also, again, 1950s, ridiculous amounts of money based on what the show's telling us they're betting.
Yeah.
They're just betting. They're betting an entire year's salary to me in one go. But speaking of standing actors, that we don't see all the way through the show. We see Henry trying to get some beauty sleep again.
Oh, poor
I
Henry.
love Henry. Poor Henry. I love his little eye mask. It's so dumb. Radar is coming to give Henry his poker winnings because he wants him to stay safe. And of course, this is such an important reason to wake the commanding officer that I love that Henry just goes, "Is this really what you woke me up for, Private O'Reilly?" "Corporal, sir, nothing is forever, Radar." It's like, why are you waking me up to hold on to your poker winnings?
That's when you declare a tax.
Yes, the dad tax, the colonel tax. But I do love that, Henry does kind of just inquisitively ask, like, "You really beat Captain Pierce at poker?" And he's like, "Oh, no, Hawkeye didn't play. He moved out of the swamp." And I do love, I said this before on a previous episode, Henry is a lovable, bumbling oaf, and I love him for it. But he is also, he may not want to be a military commander, but he is a decent enough leader that he recognizes this is unusual, and I need to pay attention to what's going on here.
Something is not right.
Something is not right.
Yeah, I feel like this episode is really like a kind of a turning point for Henry, because, like I said, up until now, he is the lovable goofball. And I do like that he gets to show that, like I said, he is not regular army, so he doesn't want to be there either. But Henry is older than Hawkeye. He has a little bit more experience than Hawkeye, and life experience, not just like a military, life experience. So he knows, he has been through these kind of things. So no matter what, he might not be as good of a surgeon as Hawkeye, but he has lived through this kind of stuff, and he can tell Hawkeye, "Listen, I know that you think you're God. I think you have to think you're God if you're a surgeon, but you think you're God and you think you're the hottest surgeon out there, but this is going to happen to everybody, and you need to realize that it's going to happen." And you know what? I always wanted to be Hawkeye. I still want to be Hawkeye. I wish I could be Hawkeye, but I find myself as I get older, more and more relating to Henry, where you're just trying to keep it all together and you're just trying to do your best. And that's all you can ask for.
Yeah. Well, so Henry is concerned, and we'll see that he acts on his concern, which, thank God. But Hawkeye has moved into the supply tent and is refusing all visitors to an extent. Nurse, I know which nurse this is. They very rarely say the names of the nurses on screen.
Baker.
Abel, Nurse Charlie, Nurse Abel, Nurse Baker, Nurse Delta. I don't know. This is Lieutenant
Epsilon.
Barbara. Nurse Epsilon. No, according to the notes here, this is Lieutenant Barbara Bannerman.
Bannerman, yeah.
Woo. That is something I do like about the later seasons, where we actually get to know the nurses a little bit more, as opposed to just this week it's this 6 random ladies.
The nurse earlier, you'll see her in through the first 3 seasons, like she'll be Nurse Baker, Nurse Abel, Nurse
Lieutenant Dish.
They
just cycle. Yeah. But she comes in, tries to, persuade Hawkeye to vent a little bit, and he's like, "No, I need to try to focus and think about this." Trapper comes in, trying to be helpful by bringing alcohol, which, honestly, I mean, I'm not going to say no to free alcohol.
It's very Trapper.
It's a very
Trapper thing to do.
To quote, lubricate the brain box, which, yeah. Hawkeye is understanding that they just want to come help. Ethan, we've come to your favorite joke in the show. Would you like to share?
Just because I want some privacy, now there's everything in here but the kitchen sink. What's in there?
Kitchen sink, sir.
Out!
That's such a dumb. This is one of those jokes where it's like, it's so stupid and obvious, but they put it in at just the right moment. It's like, I love it. It's such a great joke.
It's the inflection that the enlisted officer uses when he says it.
He's clearly not joking. There's absolutely a kitchen sink in that box. He's like, "I'm going to get yelled at for anything I say, so I'm just going to say the truth." So, Trapper invites Nurse Bannerman to see Bride of the Gorilla, which is the Knight's movie. Which, damn, movies in the 50s really do just be named anything.
Well, he does. And he invites her to miss the movie together.
Miss the movie, of course. And I know from listening to Rob's podcast, like half the movie names they come up with in the show are not real.
No.
Like The Thing That Ate the Bronx, I think, is one that's
something like that.
Remember. Yeah, there's some that are like just they're so weird.
Or it's movies like Godzilla movies that would have come out after like the Korean War would have been over. So yeah.
So Henry comes in, and I think Hawkeye kind of gets a sense of what Henry's about to do, because he's like, nah. He reacts a little bit differently to Henry coming in. Like, he's like, I know what you're gonna do. You're gonna give me the fatherly doctor talk. But so Henry starts laying into him that you are focusing on this patient because you're worried that something's gone wrong and you're dedicated to your craft. That is understandable. But the thing that Henry touches on is you are dealing with the worst case scenario at an average hospital every single patient you see. That means that 1% chance of something to go wrong on any given day back in the States is now up to like 80% chance that something's going to go wrong every single day. This, like Henry says, you can't meet a patient and go, ooh, you have a lot of complications. I may not be the right doctor for you. You have to see this patient. You have to deal with whatever goes wrong. And you don't have the luxury to, have a inflated head about it when something does go wrong. You have to acknowledge that you are also going to have mistakes, and you can't change that. It's a much more direct, it's not as direct of a line as the first rule in war is young men die. It's a much more broad look. As a doctor, you're going to have cases that stump you and mess with you, and you have to be mature about it.
I was going to say, I mean, which one do you think is better? Like because his speech here or his speech in Sometimes You Hear the Bullet? Because again, I think that's what we're talking about. Like, Henry in the show is shown as somebody, he is the commander, but he doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be in command. So he's holding on as much as he can. And he's a lovable guy, but he's way above his head. That's why Radar is running the camp. But he has the experience and he has seen stuff, and he can impart this wisdom to surgeons who are younger than he is, and also think that they know everything because they are used to forming magic with their hands and saving lives. And I just like in Sometimes You Hear the Bullet and in this, where he can sit down, because Hawkeye says to him in this one, again, because Hawkeye's being a dick to everybody, where he says, like, don't try to practice psychiatry. It always gives you a headache, Henry. But he is, I think Hawkeye knows that Henry's telling him something that he needs to hear, and that's his way of, he's always going to be a wise ass, but Henry has been through this, so he can say it to Hawkeye, and I think, he knows that Hawkeye is going to want to hear this from him, even though he's not. I mean, he says it to him. He's like, you're disgusting when you try to be, I can't remember what you say, sentimental, or when you try to be, So, I
Henry does put it to him. Henry puts it to him very bluntly. What are you more worried about, the health of your patient or your ego?
Yep.
And that's something that Hawkeye gets better with, but he's going to even in the later seasons when a certain other doctor shows up, he's still going to have that ego of, it may not be the early seasons where he's like, I'm the young hot shit doctor. Now in the later seasons, it's going to be, I've been here longer than you. I know how to do this job better than you. And it's like, you're the same people, but from completely different sides of the spectrum at that point. But yeah, as far as your question of, I don't know, guys, I'd say there are probably two Henry moments that we collectively, the three of us, really liked. Obviously, his conversation with Hawkeye is Sometimes You Hear the Bullet, was fantastic. But I think the other one we really liked where Henry knuckled down and got serious was in Chief Surgeon Who. I know Ethan particularly really liked when Henry stood up and told Frank, look, I don't give a crap about this interpersonal drama between you and Hawkeye, because at the end of the day, you are not a bad surgeon, but Hawkeye is more, he's just better than you. Like, he has a better knowledge of stuff and he works better with the staff. He's the chief surgeon. Shut up and get out of my face about it.
Enough said.
Because at the end of the day, like you said, Henry doesn't want to be there, but if he is going to be there, he's got to make decisions and handle the staff in a way that makes the hospital run. And I think, I don't know, Ethan, Jared, what do you guys think? I don't know if this is better than Sometimes You Hear the Bullet, but I think this conversation and the Sometimes You Hear the Bullet conversation work really well together. Like, having one come after the other works, because it sets up that Hawkeye and Henry kind of have this, not maybe mentor-student relationship, but I don't know how I want to describe that.
It's not quite mentor and student, but definitely like a
grudging respect.
Yeah, I mean, he has respect for Henry, but it's a weird dynamic. It's a weird dynamic.
Yeah.
But
I think Henry respects that Hawkeye is very skilled, but just doesn't have the life experience to check his ego a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I think again, like, if this was a show now, they would build this up and they would say, like, we need to build up the relationship between Hawkeye and Henry and show that Henry knows what he's doing. Back then, they didn't do that, but I think with this speech, with the Sometimes You Hear the Bullet, it's just showing that it just gives layers to the character, and that's why I love the show, because it can be hilariously funny. Henry can give some of the funniest moments of the show, but he can also be a character who can sit there and give this speech and you buy it when he gives it to Hawkeye and is calling Hawkeye on his shit and saying, like, listen, I know what you're going through. You need to realize that it's not about you. It's about all these bodies that are coming in here, and you have to get over yourself and get to work. And I mean, that's what he's basically saying.
Well, and that's why I almost don't like comparing the two speeches and Sometimes You Hear the Bullet in this episode, because in Sometimes You Hear the Bullet, that's a very heart-wrenching personal moment for Hawkeye, and this one is very, look, I'm going to tell you some things you don't like to hear, but you're acting like a child and you really can't be, so you're going to listen.
Yeah, the exact line where I think Henry nails it, it's after Radar comes in to order Love a Life of the Gorilla and Bedtime for Bonzo. Which clearly they needed to interrupt the scene for that.
How would you like the reeling list?
And I love even Hawkeye when he's over, grabs her, and it's like, what would it take for you to desert? Just get out. That's what you interrupted us for. But I think Henry hits the nail on the head with his line to Hawkeye, you need to give up the luxury of trying to be Dr. Perfect.
Yeah.
You will mess up. You will make mistakes. And you are going to look foolish when you do, but you're going to look even more foolish if you handle it like this every time. And that's some tough love from Henry. We like Henry given tough love.
Yeah.
And I love Hawkeye's response. You know something, Henry? You're not nearly as dumb as I thought you were. Which, yeah, great, Hawkeye. Way to just be a complete douche to the guy trying to give you some. Yeah, you're not an idiot, Henry. And Henry's just like, okay, whatever. I'm out of here.
If he flames out as a doctor, he has a future as a Hallmark card writer.
Oh no. So Hawkeye goes for a walk in some fresh air, and again, I said it earlier. Oh, this is the couple moments for Margaret in this episode, and she approaches Hawkeye and says, hey, I've been thinking about this just like you have, and I have some thoughts. And she even prefaces by saying, hey, I'm not trying to be a wise guy. I'm not trying to confront you, but we were working together, and I was going back over it in my head trying to figure out if we missed something. And even Hawkeye admits he's starting to come around to the idea of, it's not a matter of, did we miss something? I can't figure out what. He's starting to kind of slowly, very difficultly but he is trying to turn the mirror back on himself a little bit here. He's like, okay, we missed something, but what? Mm-hmm. And even Margaret softens a little bit. He's like, look, she knows he's concerned. She's concerned, and she's trying to come up with an answer, and she throws out some suggestions. But even then, Hawkeye is still like, no. I was the one doing the surgery. You were just there assisting. It's like, but Margaret the nurses aren't dumb. You're starting to do the Frank thing. Mm-hmm. The nurses, because we see in future episodes that a nurse will say, Dr. Burns, do you want this instrument? Try this. Because the nurses are there watching the same surgeries that the doctors are performing day in and day out. Whether they want to or not, they're picking up on, oh, this is what this doctor likes to do. This is how we typically do this fix. And Margaret is a fantastic nurse, and she's trying to bring some of that skill to bear, and Hawkeye shuts her down because he still hasn't quite accepted that yet.
That's a good point that you made, though, and I don't know if they're even trying to do that within the episode, but Hawkeye is basically acting like Frank. He might not be as... Yeah. He might not... Well, he's being obnoxious, but not in the same way that Frank is. He's coming at it from a different point of view, but he's being like Frank, where he's like, I don't want to hear what your opinion is. I'm the doctor. I know what I did. I know what I'm doing, and I don't want to hear what you have to say because I didn't do anything wrong. So he's basically acting like the person that he was berating earlier in the episode, and now he doesn't see it.
Because before, Hawkeye is skilled enough that I would argue Hawkeye and Frank probably are just as egotistical about themselves as the other is. But Hawkeye has the skill to back up that a little bit. Hawkeye can afford to be a little bit egotistical because he can hold up results that say, I am good. Kind of like in Chief Surgeon Who, when he's being kind of a dick to General Barker, like, okay, Dag, he's kind of quizzing him on what am I going to do next in this surgery? Like, I clearly know what I'm doing. There's no reason for you to be here watching me over my shoulder. And he's kind of doing the same thing here. He's like, I'm being a dick, but I always do everything perfectly, so I can be a dick. Whereas Frank messes up constantly, so he doesn't have that leg to stand on. Now Hawkeye has lost that little bit of credibility with this case, so now we're seeing just the pure ego.
You've become the very thing you swore to destroy.
It all comes back to Star Wars.
It all comes back to Star Wars.
Even before it was ever created or the story was written, it all comes back to Star Wars. I can't wait.
I know you've probably
Careful,
seen
Obi-Wan.
the clip.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Oh, no.
Which is an absolute.
Which is an absolute, yes. Oh, don't get me started on all the hypocrisy.
Careful, Qui-Gon.
Hypocrisy of the Jedi.
Only a Jedi is that hypocritical.
Oh, no. Welcome back to...
That's for next episode.
Welcome back to Best Care Anywhere, a Star Wars podcast. That's our spin-off story. It's just the podcast is always called Best Care Anywhere, whatever we're talking about.
Best Care Anywhere, parentheses, in the galaxy.
Best Care Anywhere in the galaxy.
There you go.
Cross out anywhere, the galaxy.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you see, back in the 70s, too, they used to extend, TV shows, Gilligan's Island, they would make them, go into space. I wish they kind of would have done that with MASH, and they could have, done, Best Care Anywhere in the galaxy, and they just, they've been transported onto an planet.
Isn't that kind of what the books did?
Yeah,
if you look at the extended MASH, the books were...
I've never read any of the other than the original book. I think
I knew I wasn't.
I don't hate myself that much to put myself through that.
Yeah, I haven't read the first book yet, but I saw that some of the subsequent titles are MASH Goes to Paris, and I'm like, oh god, it's a Clifford the Big Red Dog book now.
Yeah, they're not even really written by the guy. Have you heard of W.E.B. Griffith, the writer?
I've heard the name, but I couldn't.
Yeah, I think he ghost wrote most of those the continuation novels. But yeah, I've never subjected myself to any of the other than the original novel. I've never read any of the other ones.
I can't wait until we get into it'll be like season 5 or 6. Because there's a great clip, and I'm sure you've seen it, Mike, where it's a blooper outtake from MASH, and it's a scene where Hawkeye's talking, and Margaret or Loretta, Gary, and Henry Morgan come in and they're all wearing the big plastic Star Wars mask and they interrupt the scene and they're like,
I've seen,
and it's the, I need to send it to you because it's the most like mind fucking, because it's filmed and shot like it's a scene of MASH, and all of a sudden Colonel Potter, Margaret, and Radar are walking wearing Stormtrooper Chewbacca and Darth Vader masks, and it's such a mind fuck of like, what the hell's going on? But man, dude, we got off on a tangent. Holy crap! No.
I blame myself.
I knew going into this episode, like, man, this is gonna be a. Ooh,
we say it on our podcast. It all comes back to Star Wars. It all
comes back to Star Wars. So, Margaret's trying to help. Hawkeye starts to get a little confrontation with her, and she walks off like, "I'm not going to deal with you if you're behaving like this." And she even recommends a very specific, could it have nicked the small intestine? Could we have missed a piece of shrapnel? And he's like, I'm not listening to it because clearly I didn't mess up that bad. Fast forward a few hours, Hawkeye jolts awake with a realization, bangs on Margaret's door, gets her awake, gets Ugly John to do anesthesia, interrupts a romantic interlude of Frank and Margaret's, as we see. Frank is hiding in her footlocker.
Frank.
With a bottle of, oh, Frank. And we get another fairly quiet and serious surgery scene of Hawkeye's focused on his stuff. Margaret's paying attention to what's going on. I kind of like that they had Frank gown up and come in, simply because this is still that season 1 Frank of he's insufferable and he's a pain in the ass, but he still has a glimmer of being an okay doctor. Mm-hmm. Again, kind of like where when Henry wanted to cut Radar open, he's still in that frame of I'm arrogant and I'm irritating, but I'm still invested in what's going on medically. So I kind of like that. It's just a small detail.
Yeah, just wait till the next episode. He starts to get more buffoonish now.
Oh God, yeah. I know. As soon as we're done saying all this about Frank, we're gonna get just the dumbest.
Look at all this character development that Frank is getting. Never mind.
Yeah, the more we watch season 1, the more I'm like, man, I would so have aired these in a very different order. But anyway,
but it is a good line when he comes in and says anybody could have missed that, and when he says like, thanks, Frank, I think he actually is being, I don't think he's being sarcastic when he says it. I think then he realizes like, okay, I've been going around about this all wrong, and I screwed up, I missed it, and I'm going to kind of let him off the hook too. So, I mean, again, you could have developed that. I know, again, going back to before we started recording, like talks when you have MASH fans talking like how you could have developed Frank and made him different. I mean, you could have developed that then where Hawkeye and Frank, maybe you make Frank not as buffoonish as he would become, and maybe they come to a certain understanding. I mean, you have it in this episode, but it works in the character for Hawkeye's character development in this episode, where I think in that moment he gets it, and he sees that he shouldn't have treated Margaret that way. He's still gonna berate Frank, but he's gonna berate him when he deserves it, not just in service of his own ego.
Not just because. Yeah.
And even Hawkeye says that he missed a piece of shrapnel that nicked the back of the sigmoid colon. I can't remember if sigmoid is the ascending cross or the.
It's the descending one right above the rectum. It's the very.
It's the last section. Okay.
Yep.
But weirdly, that's almost not quite, but it's almost exactly the scenario Margaret described. She thought it may have nicked somewhere in the small intestine. She didn't call it shot for shot what may have been wrong, but she was close. Mm-hmm. So she is knowledgeable enough to have a sense of what could have gone wrong and make it a reasonable, educated guess. And I think Frank's anyone could have missed that is an acknowledgement of, not only, dang, I would have easily made that mistake too, but it's the closest Frank ever gets to any sort of apology.
That's the closest he comes. Yep.
Yeah, that's the closest he comes. And like you said, Mike, it's Hawkeye recognizes that that's Frank's way of admitting a little bit of fault at what he said, and Hawkeye's like, yeah, I appreciate that, and it is I think it's a genuine thanks back to Frank.
Yep.
But. Yeah.
I do find it weird that she says, "I'm so glad Hawkeye," because Margaret never calls him.
Yeah,
not this early. Not this early. I mean, in later seasons, but like in the first season, I don't feel like she would ever call him Hawkeye. So I don't know if it's just they wrote it that way or if that's meant to show a kind of thawing a little bit in increments in their relationship.
I like to think, and again, this is coming from our generation that gets shows that have a very well thought out character development and plot line through an entire season. I think that kind of affects the way I go back and look at MASH, because I like to read into things that probably were never intended to be there. But I read into this is the very first time Margaret has kind of brought that guard down for a second with Hawkeye, because I mean, we'll see in episodes after she goes right back to being this episode. That's why I like this episode for Margaret as well, because this is the first time we see her kind of drop that veil and come to Hawkeye and be like, hey, serious heart-to-heart, nurse to doctor moment, let's figure out what's wrong with this patient. So it may have been kind of a bit too early for her to be so casual with Hawkeye, but also for how the story was written, I think it works. I think it's that one moment of, because I still think one of my favorite Margaret episodes is The Nurses, where she just opens up completely. But I think I like the episodes where you get a little bit more how Margaret will be at the later seasons, because God, do I hate tied to the hip to Frank bitchy matron Margaret. I really do. I think Loretta Swit is so much better than that, but we'll get there.
Yep.
We get the bumper scene that they have accepted Hawkeye has moved out of the swamp. He complains that he gave the swamp its name. He threw the first load of garbage on the floor. Lafayette, I am here. And they accept him back with open arms and a martini. And scene.
Of course.
And scene. So yeah, sometimes, and I just said sometimes you hear the bullet. I don't know why. That Sticky Wicket, that other episode name.
Sticky Wicket.
Yeah.
Sometimes you hear the wicket.
I feel like Mike and I have gotten very deep in this episode. Ethan and Jared, for being probably maybe not the first time you've seen this episode, but certainly the first time discussing it at this length. What did you think? Because I think this is, again, like I said, this is an episode that I always forget is in season 1, and that's like half the episodes in season 1. I'm like, oh shit, this was season 1, and it's this good. Okay. But it's to me, it's an episode I ignored. And then once I appreciated the characters a little bit more, I went back and went, oh, there's a lot of little things that get done in this episode that do get fleshed out further down the line. And I really like it. But what do you think of how, and another reason I know this episode is very straightforward is on the little fan page for all the episodes, I go and look up and see if there's any little details I'm missing. There's no mistakes. There's no like fun facts. It's just, this is the plot. These are the character developments, done. There's no little frills or anything to it. So what did you guys think of this episode as far as the characters?
This episode's really great because I think that the getting a look at Hawkeye is probably one of the best things about this episode. You know, we get to see a bit of a different side of Hawkeye this time, which is always nice. We get a couple good moments with Margaret. A couple. Yeah, it's not quite like a deeply serious episode like sometimes you hear the bullet, but it's in the same category, if that makes sense. It's not the same type of episode, but it's in the same genre, I'd say. Where MASH gets a little more serious in its tone, not quite to the same extent. But yeah, definitely a lot of good character development in this one.
The question I kind of wanted to pose to the group at large about it is, do you think it would have been a better episode if the soldier had died?
Ooh, I don't. I have many alternate plot lines for MASH episodes. I have an alternate plot line for the finale that I'm going to piss a lot of people off with in about 11 years because I think it would have made the ending very different. As far as if Hawkeye's... I don't think so, because I think Hawkeye needed to have that moment where he admits, here's what I did wrong, here's where I wasn't paying attention, and waking Margaret up and saying, come with me, you had the right idea, I need your help. I don't think Hawkeye's character would have been served as well. I don't think that would have been a bad plot line. I think that they could have done something interesting with that, but I don't think we get the same character payoff if the patient died. I do think having Hawkeye come to the realization of what he did wrong and that Margaret was almost had the right idea of what was wrong helps more. I think killing the patient would have been too much. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Mike? Because I'm sure I can't be the only MASH fan that has ever watched an episode of MASH and go, ooh, what if they did this? Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think much like Doctor Who, like don't sleep on the Ninth Doctor, like don't sleep on MASH the first season, because a lot of people say like, the first season. There are like these few episodes where, I mean, there's always the episodes where they're kind of like finding their way, but there's episodes like this, like you said, you don't realize it's a season 1 episode because there's a lot of character development in this. And yeah, I mean, for this, they would go in later episodes and seasons where you would have a patient die. I think this early in the run of the series, you needed the patient to live because Hawkeye had to, for his character development, had to realize what he did, and then his way of apologizing is basically bringing Margaret in to work on the patient again with him, and then that him and Frank with their dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
So
you don't get any of the reconciliation.
Where I can see the dramatic, where the drama would come from if the patient died. I think in this situation, I think the patient had to live just because it's servicing Hawkeye's character development in the series. I think later, a few seasons down the line, when the characters are more developed, then you can, if the patient dies, then you're seeing how they react that, and you go from there. But I think this early in the series, you have to have the patient live, just because it's showing that Hawkeye learns from his mistakes. I think if the patient dies, I think that's too much of like an indictment on him, where he screwed up and then you're kind of punishing him. You have to show that he screwed up, but he learned from his mistake and he was able to go back, redo, find what he missed and learn from it and say like, you know what, I'm not perfect, but now I see that I have to, I have to come from this from a different perspective. So, I mean, it's a great question, but I think this early, I think the patient has to live.
And to give kind of the other side of the camera argument for why they're still trying to convince the studio that, hey, this is fun, sit down, watch TV show. The only serious death we've had so far has been very necessary to the plot of an episode. So MASH will get better with patients are going to die right, left, and sideways in the later seasons because war. But for now, it's still the early scene, like fun, sitcom, comedy, sit down, fun time. So yeah.
Jared, what about you? I'd love to hear your thoughts on
it. Similar opinion. Too early for a patient to die. If it was a later season, then yeah, probably, but it's too much too soon.
Especially no offense to Thompson, a run-of-the-mill generic wounded soldier character. There's much better uses of patient death going forward, and this although it would have been interesting, this would not have been the right time. So
yeah, it's true. I mean, you don't even get to know him that much. So I mean, if they would have built the character up and then he dies, you're feeling it from that too. If you get to like the character and then they do whatever they can do and they can't save him, the audience is feeling that too. So I mean, you only get a couple lines of dialogue from him, so you don't even really get that. This is more about Hawkeye's feelings and not being able to figure out what's going on. It's unfortunately, I mean, saying it the way I'm going to say it, but it's not really about the patient. It's about what he's going through. So
yeah.
Wow, way to just rip the heart out of Private Thompson.
I know. I apologize to him.
It's not about him.
70 years after the fact.
So, I guess we'll start guests first. What you basically just gave your thoughts on the episode, but what is your thoughts of the episode and your rating for your live on the podcast rating for Sticky Wicket?
I forget. Is it out of 4 stars, 5?
It's out of 5.
Out of 5. Out of 5. You can't
change it all the time whenever I.
You did give us a 4 out of 4, so I just did the conversion. It is 100%. You know.
Out of 5, I would say I'd give it a 4 out of 5. I do think it's one of the better first season episodes, and I think because it shows what MASH will get better at in the later episodes, where it can balance. There are funny parts of this episode. There are really there's dialogue. There is very very witty dialogue. There are very funny parts, but it shows that they like you were just saying. The network was looking for haha funny. This is wacky shenanigans at the front, and that's not what MASH was ever going for. And this showed what they could, how they could do it, where they could balance. We can have some funny parts, but we're also going to get serious, and we're going to delve into the psychology of what these characters are thinking, and we're going to get a little deep. And I think for a show that, like you just said, I mean, we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of the finale, and last year in the fall it was the 50th anniversary of it premiering. We forget now because MASH is something that's in the in pop culture and people know about it. But back then it was something that was different for audiences who were used to like Hogan's Heroes and Gomer Pyle and stuff like that. I mean, if that's what they were expecting when they were coming to watch an episode of MASH, they were in for something different. And I think that's why that's why we're sitting here doing a podcast all these years later, because it gave you something different and it gave you something to think about. So yeah, I give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's a really good episode. It's not like the funniest episode. It's not the most dramatic episode, but you're getting all kinds of character development with our main characters. And it's an episode I've watched. It's one of the better season 1 episodes in an uneven, because it's the first season, an uneven season. It's one of the high points of the season, I would say.
Yeah, excellent. Jared or Ethan, I'll open it to you guys. What are your thoughts?
I think I'd give it a 4.5 out of 5.
Ooh.
Yeah, just mostly because this is one of the episodes that I think will leave a lasting impression. I'm going to remember this episode out of the majority of the season 1 episodes. I mean, technically, I'm going to remember Edwina too, but not for the same reasons.
Poor Arlene Galanka.
Oh yeah, but
we
no, this
Arlene,
episode was really
Edwina.
good. This episode was really good. It had a lot of good character development with Hawkeye, which is always lovely to see. I usually appreciate the more serious toned episodes. This one in particular, very very nice. A lot of good little gags, but not too many. It wasn't too silly. They were sprinkled in nicely. So yeah, 4.5 out of 5. This episode was baked basically to perfection.
Oh,
yeah.
Ethan, what about you?
I'm right there with Jared. I'm at about a 4.5 out of 5. Mostly because I had a lot of very emotional responses to the lines. You know, I got very involved. You know, Mike said something earlier that he he kind of relates to Hawkeye a little bit, and I definitely do. I consider him my kind of touchstone character. To see some of the interactions and reactions that he had with Frank that I think I would personally parrot. Just really gave me the warm fuzzy.
Oh, well, good. Yeah, I think we're all pretty much on the same page. As I predicted, I actually kind of thought to myself, I bet Jared and Ethan rate this a little higher than Mike and I do, simply because Mike is probably doing the same thing I'm doing, where I'm kind of grading on a curve. I know what my 5 out of 5 episodes are.
Yeah.
But I love that. I love that since you guys are watching this chronologically, how that kind of affects your rating. I'm not saying your ratings are not appropriate. I find that fascinating. But I'm going to give it a 4.2, so I'm right in that same ballpark. Basically for all the reasons you all said. I think it's an excellent little peek into what MASH is going to do, because this does feel like a kind of a later season episode where you have the little bit of funny, but you also have a character dealing with something fairly serious that needs to be addressed. It also occurs to me that this plot of doctor has patient that he can't figure out problem with episode of him trying to figure it out. Oh, wait, it's this. Solve it. Is that not 90% of the episodes of like ER and House now? Yeah. Is this like the prototypical like medical drama?
Uh-huh.
Which, oh boy. But yeah, 4.2 just because it's a very, like you all said, it's a well-rounded episode. It's good character development for I'd say majorly for Hawkeye and minorly for Margaret, a little bit for Henry, and even in a sense a little bit for Frank. We see that, we get a little bit more of insight as to why Frank responds the way he does to being poked and jibed and all that by Hawkeye and Trapper. So yeah,
I mean, you guys always have really great insights. So I'm excited to see years down the line when we get to the episodes that you can kind of loop around and bring this up again, how you guys react to it. Because again, they don't have like some kind of like series Bible where they're like, okay, we're going to do this, and like 4 years from now we're going to do this. But you know, they didn't plan it that way, but it does loop around, and I'm going to be interested to hear how you guys react, especially to a certain episode where another character is kind of dealing with something like this, and Hawkeye is coming from it from a different angle, and they never bring this episode up, but you can headcanon it that like, okay, he has been through this, so now he's reacting to it with this character because he's been through it. So it's going to be very interesting to hear your opinions on
that. And the moment has come. Mike, you aren't the audience this time. You get to go through the audience opinions with us. This is exciting. So our good friend Chad Smith gives this a 3.8 out of 5. Hawkeye's scene with Henry in the supply tent is a standout, and there are glimmers of the strong professional admiration that will continue to grow between Margaret and Hawkeye. Yes, I like that.
That is a good way to word that.
Margaret, there's a great episode in season 2 that forces Margaret and Hawkeye to have to coexist and work together, and this is a good precursor to that. Let's see, where's another... I made the mistake of posting more than just the one what do you think of this episode tweet in 1 week because of the finale, so now I'm having to sort. There's so many. Anyone who followed us on Twitter, thank you. I appreciate that. Dean Bear says Frank's jabs were justified a little bit because Hawkeye was acting like a prick with his holier-than-thou attitude. Henry's sermon to Hawkeye was perfect because he was behaving that way because one patient went sour on him. Yeah. I don't think 100% of Frank's comments were justified, but yes, the general, if you can't take what you dish out tone Frank had, I do kind of agree with, but yeah, the putting the patient's life and health in the middle of that argument, not a great look, Frank. Really not good. And actually, that's all the response we got. Light week for responses on this one, I think, because everyone was so enamored with the finale. But yeah, that's some good feedback. The next episode is, oh boy, I there are some times where I look at what the next episode on the list is, and I go, is this really what episode comes after this? The next episode is Major Fred C. Dobbs. Any fans of The Treasure of the Sierra Madre might have a hint at what this episode is about.
Good luck, boys. Good luck.
Yeah.
Godspeed.
Yeah, this is a rough one. I wouldn't say it's Edwina bad, but it's
no, God no.
Yeah. It's
an interesting episode.
It's an interesting episode.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
You'll have opinions. You'll have opinions.
Okay. All right.
But that's all I got for Sticky Wicket. Any closing comments before we get out of here and
no,
go about our evenings? I don't think so. All right. Mike, where can all the fine people of the internet find you and all that jazz? Plug yourself.
Yeah, before I lead them into the cesspool that is Twitter, I just wanted to thank you guys for having me, and I love the podcast. Again, I'm here, so I don't need to kiss up. So I'm being totally sincere. I hope I didn't talk over you guys. I hope I
no.
You know, I'm a big MASH nerd, so when we start talking MASH, I just
I think I picked up on that.
Yeah.
There were
Something gave it
hints.
away. I
You
can't
can
put my
tell.
finger on it, but
Why? Because I'm sitting here in my Klinger Halloween outfit? I mean, come on.
Oh no. See, now you're just saying that because you know there's no video element to this.
Yeah, oh God, thank God.
cheesy.
Oh, thank goodness. Yes, so if people want to venture onto the
The hellscape that is
the
Twitter.
hellscape, the hellscape that is Twitter, I am on there as this lightsaber kills fascists. I am also on there. I have a podcast with my partner Chris Ryans called the Nice Guys NOICEGUYS Nice Guys podcast. We're at Nice Guys Pod, where we talk about obscure movies from the 70s and 80s. So if you want to come by and give us a listen, that'd be great. We're on YouTube. And I'm on Facebook under my name, and I'm around. I'm a nice guy. If you want to, hence the name of the podcast, if you want to come and say hi and talk about MASH, talk about movies, talk about Star Wars.
Oh God,
I am
so
always
much.
open.
oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh no,
I will
I
say the Nice Guys podcast is some quality entertainment. They will get a better plug from me if they ever cover Easy Rider. But because they haven't yet, you can know that is genuine. It's good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
So only
knew-
4
I
out of 5
knew-
stars.
I knew I needed to tune into the podcast when the first episode was about Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah, man.
Like, okay, I don't know. I know everyone's talking about Star Wars, but I need to know what people's thoughts are on Jesus Christ
Yes.
Superstar.
And like I said, thank you, because your plug when you said like anybody can do a million podcasts can do Star Wars, but there's not many out there doing Jesus Christ Superstar. That would be on the back of the VHS cassette tape. Like, under like movie of the decade, then it would be just like everybody can talk about Star Wars, but not many podcasts are talking about Jesus Christ Superstar. That is basically our manifesto. We're going to talk about the movies out there that they might not be the biggest movies, but the people who have seen them. And if you haven't seen them, we're going to make you want to go out and watch them. So
Good.
hop on by.
Not a cult. Not a cult.
Oh no, no. If they have to tell you they're not a cult, they're probably a cult. And on that note, thank you guys for tuning in. Join us next episode for Major Fred C. Dobbs at Bring Your Alcohol. Other than that, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys later, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Get out.
There it is. He does that every time, and I cut it out every time.
One of these days he's going to leave it in.
The time has come for us to say sayonara. My heart will always be yours for eternity.